Good morning. You're looking at a live view of Starship as we await its fourth flight test from Starbase, Texas, also known as the Gateway to Mars. Thanks for tuning in. We're excited to be joining you once again from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. As you can tell, the crowd is getting excited behind us. We're here in front of Mission Control Center. Now, we are targeting liftoff at 7:50 a.m. Central Time in just over 30 minutes from now. It's been roughly 2.5 months since our last Starship flight test, and the turnaround time between these tests just keeps getting shorter and shorter.
Today, we hope to surpass what we achieved in Flight Test 3 in March. Our primary goal is to get through the extreme heat of Starship reentry, which is no easy feat. As with all of our flight tests, our goal is to collect as much data as possible. Every flight gets us another step closer to a fully operational Starship. Starship is the most powerful vehicle ever developed and the first design of a rocket that is capable of making life multiplanetary.
Starship will allow us to land humans on the moon again after more than half a century, fly the heaviest payloads ever flown, and ultimately fly humans further into space than ever before. Getting there will require us to fly frequently, which is why we're producing so fast. We already have hardware built and are preparing for our next several flights.
But the most important thing about Starship is that it's designed to be fully and rapidly reusable, and of course, reliable. We've been designing from day one to realize a vision of having an entire city of people on Mars, something we know will take launching millions of pounds of cargo and equipment into space spread across thousands of launches.
The faster we can learn now, the faster we can improve and evolve Starship to achieve this vision. And that brings us to today's flight test, the fourth of many that will get us one step closer to Mars. But before we dive into the details of today's test, let's do a quick rewind and talk about our last integrated flight test, Flight 3. On March 14th, Starship successfully lifted off at 8:25 a.m. Central Time from Starbase, Texas. It cleared the launch tower and went on to accomplish several major milestones and firsts. All 33 Raptor engines on the Super Heavy booster started up successfully and completed a full duration 2-minute and 41-second ascent burn.
Then we saw our second ever hot stage separation, powering down all but 3 of Super Heavy's Raptor engines and then igniting the ship's 6 Raptors to create separation. Next, Super Heavy completed its flip maneuver and ignited the 13 center engines for the boost back burn to send it towards its splashdown point in the Gulf of Mexico. All 13 engines ran successfully until 6 engines began shutting down, triggering an early end to the boost back.
After descent, we attempted the first ever Super Heavy landing burn, which uses the same 13 center engines that we used on boost back. Since 6 of those experienced the early shutdown in the boost back burn, we attempted the landing burn with the remaining 7 Raptors, and 2 of those 7 reached main stage ignition. In the end, contact was lost with the booster at approximately 462 meters in altitude over the Gulf of Mexico, just under 7 minutes into the mission.
Post-flight data reviews showed that the early boost back burn shutoff was most likely caused by filter blockage where oxygen is supplied to the engines. We saw a similar issue on Flight 2 and had added hardware to mitigate it, which worked to get us to our first ever landing burn attempt.
Now, for today's flight, we upgraded those filters further and made some additional hardware and software changes to increase our chances of igniting all 13 engines for the landing burn. Now, turning back to the Flight 3 ship, we saw all 6 Raptor engines start successfully and powered the vehicle to space, marking the first time we completed its full ascent burn.
While coasting, we completed some additional objectives, including the opening and closing of the payload door. We also transferred propellant between tanks inside the ship, which is a key test as we prepare for full ship-to-ship prop transfers in the future. Once we were into our coast, though, the ship gradually lost the ability to control its attitude or orientation, which is done with smaller thrusters around the spacecraft.
As a result, the vehicle experienced some unplanned rolling. It still flew on the planned trajectory, but losing attitude control triggered the flight computer to skip a planned relight of a single Raptor engine while on orbit. And then the moment that we all had been looking forward to for so long, as you can see here, the ship's re-entry from space. This was the first time that we were able to get real live flight data on things like heating and vehicle control during hypersonic re-entry, of which we will talk more about later.
Not having attitude control meant both protected and unprotected areas saw heating much higher than anticipated. But we were able to get live, high-definition views and real-time data during entry thanks to Starlink terminals on the ship, which itself was a widely successful test. This gave us confidence that we'll continue to get unparalleled insight into the ship's re-entry in order to rapidly improve.
And as they say, all good things must come to an end. And for Flight 3, this occurred when contact with the ship was lost at approximately 65 kilometers in altitude, roughly 50 minutes into the mission. After reviewing data from the flight, we found the most likely cause of the unplanned rolling seen during the ship coast phase and re-entry phase was blockage of valves that help control the smaller attitude control thrusters.
We upgraded these to make them more resilient and added some additional thrusters for redundancy. Overall, we learned a tremendous amount from that last flight, and capping it off with those re-entry views was truly an exciting end to the mission.
Incredible.
So back to today's test. Today's mission profile is similar to Flight 3, but we have new test objectives, the first of which is getting through the extreme heat of re-entry. About 27 minutes from now, Super Heavy will ignite its 33 Raptor engines and lift off from Starbase. A little more than 2.5 minutes into flight, the Super Heavy booster will separate from the ship in a hot stage separation, meaning that it'll light its engines while still attached to a partially lit booster. The booster will perform a flip maneuver, followed by a boost back burn. About 2 seconds after that burn ends, we'll jettison the booster's hot stage. As it heads back to Earth, the booster will attempt a landing burn before splashing down into the Gulf.
Meanwhile, the ship's engines will remain lit for just under 6 minutes during its ascent before shutting down for the coast phase. The ship will coast for about 40 minutes or so, reaching a peak altitude of 214 kilometers. And after its coast phase, the ship will attempt a controlled re-entry, including a flip maneuver and a landing burn, before splashing down in the Indian Ocean. Now, we say attempting because, again, this is a test and nothing is guaranteed. As we mentioned earlier, the booster and the ship have to contend with some extreme conditions on re-entry.
For this flight test, we do not plan to recover any hardware from the booster or the ship. With the exception of Falcon, this is no different than what happens to most rockets flying today that are expended or fall into the ocean after completing their mission. Eventually, we will land and recover Starship boosters and ships, as we do today with Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy boosters. And in fact, we've landed 316 Falcon boosters to date.
Even though recovery is not planned, the telemetry and data we receive all the way to the end is what we're looking for, which will help us continue to build a rapidly reusable Starship for the future. In other words, the payload for this mission is data. It's also worth mentioning that the hot stage jettison is an off-nominal procedure that we're using as a temporary way to reduce the weight of the vehicle for its water landing today.
Yeah, exactly. Future designs give Super Heavy boosters a lighter weight integrated hot stage intended for full reusability, which will mitigate the need to jettison the hot stage. Okay, so now that we have a handle on today's flight test, let's check in with Dan. Dan, how's it going?
Hey, Jesse, and welcome everybody back to Starbase for yet another Starship launch. I'm coming to you live from the Raptor's nest behind the Mega Bay. I'm here with our Pad Red team and some of our flight controllers this morning. Everything has been going really smooth. We did have the Red team going a little bit earlier to fix a ground side issue, but that was taken care of. That's why we slid a little bit later into our window. But as of right now, we are on track for liftoff at 7:50 a.m. Central Time. That's 12:50 UTC. As you can see, we are actively loading propellant onto Starship and Super Heavy. Those frost lines are ticking up as we load liquid methane, that's our fuel, liquid oxygen, that's our oxidizer, onto both vehicles. They're cryogenic, so they're subcooled to several hundred degrees below zero. Since Flight 3, we've made a few more upgrades, helping to bring Prop Farm 2.0 online. That's just going to help us to continue to shorten the amount of prop load time that we're going to need. We're also going to be using it for Launch Tower number 2, which is going to be coming to Starbase real soon. The faster we go, the less prop we're going to lose to boil off, and the better we can ensure things like temperatures are in the right range for Raptor startup. Now, those first two flights took about 90 minutes to load prop on board. That third, we knocked it all the way down to just 51 minutes. We're aiming for about 46 minutes of prop load time for today's op, eventually hoping to get that down all the way to 40, which for some context, that's just 5 minutes more than we take to load Falcon 9, but we're doing it with 10 times the amount. So this morning, ship prop load started at T-minus 50 minutes, booster at T-minus 43 minutes. We're going to pause the ship main tank prop load in just a couple of minutes to do the header tanks, which are going to do that attempted ship landing burn. We expect the ship to close out all of its prop at about 3 minutes and 20 seconds before liftoff, and then booster at about 2:50. Now, our final countdown sequence is going to look very familiar. It's going to be the exact same as it was on flights 2 and 3. So we'll light those engines, and then about 4 seconds later, we will actually see it lift off. But I mean, right now, we are just under 23 minutes away from launch. We're not working any issues either with the vehicle, the range. Weather is 95% go, so not dealing with any winds or weather issues today. If we do have to scrub, our next attempt would probably be about 48 hours from now. It's all going to be driven by commodities and just how far we get into the count. But everything looking good for liftoff just about 22 and a half minutes from now. I'll check back in with you guys in a few minutes, and I'll send it back over to Kate and Jesse.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. Flight tests like today are the fastest possible route for us to dramatically improve Starship's capabilities. The Starship flying today has already seen a number of changes based on what we learned from Flight Test 3 in March, which was only 2.5 months ago. Development moves really fast here at SpaceX. Let's take a closer look at the iteration of the vehicle flying today. Starship is comprised of two elements, the ship, which has 6 Raptor engines, and the Super Heavy booster, which has 33 Raptor engines.
The current iteration of Starship is essentially an experimental vehicle flying for development. Starship 2 will be capable of carrying more than 100 tons to orbit, and Starship 3 will be able to handle more than 200 tons to orbit. Compared to Saturn V, the rocket that first took astronauts to the moon, Starship has more than twice the thrust. And with a few planned upgrades, Starship will have 3 times the thrust of Saturn V, plus the added benefit of full reusability. The amount of mass that we're able to launch per rocket is crucial to creating a self-sustaining city on Mars.
Now, to get a sense of how big Starship is, let's start with the average-sized human, which is about 2 meters high. And towering over our average human is the length of the Millennium Falcon, which comes in at 35 meters. Our Falcon 9 rocket with the payload fairing attached is double the size of the Millennium Falcon at 70 meters, and nearly twice the size of that is the fully integrated Starship at 121 meters tall. The ship is about 50 meters tall, and the Super Heavy booster alone stands 71 meters. Eventually, the ship and booster will get even taller.
Starship's first stage has a diameter roughly 2.5 times that of Falcon 9, and with 33 much larger Raptor engines, as you see there. I love this view because we don't have this view on our Falcon missions. This is looking up under the Super Heavy booster. Now, moving up the rocket, the ship features 6 Raptors, 3 sea-level engines, and 3 vacuum engines, which, as the name suggests, are optimized to operate in the vacuum of space. And Starship is designed for vertical takeoff and landing on any hard surface. The ship is also outfitted with 4 flaps to help aerodynamically control the vehicle's attitude during atmospheric flight and enable a precise landing.
And in between the first and second stages is our hot stage, our newest separation technique, which we saw in action during flight tests 2 and 3. The body of Starship is wrapped in a heat shield made up of 18,000 hexagonal ceramic tiles designed to insulate the vehicle during atmospheric entry, where temperatures can be as high as 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit or over 1,400 degrees Celsius. Speaking of those heat shield tiles, re-entry was a pretty exciting first for our team, and Starlink allowed us to gather critical data about this stage of flight.
Reusability significantly reduces the cost of space travel, and it's the key to making humans a multi-planet species. Starship is designed for rapid reusability, which means the booster and the ship need to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and land back precisely at the launch site.
With each flight test, we gather more and more data to help hone Starship's re-entry capabilities. The more information we have from each flight, the quicker Starship development can proceed. One way to gather more information is to improve communication throughout the flight, including re-entry, where historically there has been a communications blackout.
To do this, we equipped Starship with Starlink terminals to expand its communication capabilities. The Starlink terminals are those 4 black squares that you see there on top of the ship. Starlink is the world's largest constellation of highly advanced satellites operating in a low orbit around the Earth, providing high-speed internet on Earth and now in space.
Starship is designed to have a large surface area to create considerable drag during re-entry. Traveling at about 27,000 kilometers per hour, or almost 17,000 miles per hour, Starship compresses the air in front of it, causing the temperature of the air to rise and ionize, turning it into plasma. This plasma layer interferes with communications by absorbing and reflecting radio waves, leading to the communications blackout we've seen historically with spacecraft during atmospheric reentry. With Starship, most of that plasma is built up around the front and sides of the vehicle, leaving an opening downstream where we're able to point our Starlink terminals. And with Starlink also operating at a higher frequency than traditional space-based communications, we're able to power through any residual plasma to provide real-time video and data at high speeds back to the ground.
Super cool. We actually got to see this in action on Starship's last test, Flight 3, which had the first ever live HD video of a spaceship re-entering the atmosphere. SpaceX engineers were able to gather data on the performance of Starship as it re-entered the atmosphere and watched the heat shield in action. Now, the physics of re-entry are extremely hard to replicate perfectly on the ground, so access to this data is an invaluable tool for rapid iteration. In fact, one cool observation from that Flight 3 was seeing how shock waves form at different parts of the vehicle and how they interact to put pressure on the ship, especially the flaps. This is really valuable for Starship since no spacecraft has ever flown with 4 movable flaps like what we use for aerodynamic control. Starship's greatest strength will be rapid and reliable reusability, and Starlink has become a critical tool to make that a reality.
Over the next few flights, we'll continue to improve the Starlink performance on Starship, eventually enabling more views and enabling more data to be transmitted in real time. And we'll keep experimenting during entry. You might have noticed a few tiles missing or looking different near the bottom of Starship. We intentionally placed 1 thin tile and removed 2 tiles completely. In their place, we now have sensors to see how hot things get without the tiles in those locations, while also testing some backup thermal protection options. Ideally, we expect Starship's reentry to improve on each flight, thanks in part to this wealth of new data. But if getting to space is hard, returning from space is even harder.
That's right. No one has ever succeeded in creating a fully and rapidly reusable heat shield. So we could see some spectacular failures before we get this right. But with communications improving on each flight, we will continue to gather more and more data to inform our development. We're now about 15 and a half minutes until our next liftoff attempt. In the meantime, let's take a look at some of the technology we have in development as we prepare to head to the moon in future missions.
Starship will be taking astronauts to the moon as part of NASA's Artemis program. Next year, we plan to demonstrate ship-to-ship propellant transfer, which will be important for our upcoming moon missions. Today, we're actively testing a lot of hardware that will make exploring the moon possible. One recent series of tests brought together the key pieces we'll see when landing back on the moon: Starship, spacesuits, and astronauts.
Together with Axiom and NASA, our teams put 2 astronauts in pressurized Axiom spacesuits and practiced the first steps of going to the lunar surface. The team used test builds of a Starship airlock, as you see there, and elevator to gather data on how well future Artemis astronauts will be able to move around once fully suited. Tests like this are incredibly helpful for engineers designing these systems, as they have the opportunity to get feedback directly from experienced astronauts Peggy Whitson, who is on the right of this photo, and Doug Wheelock, who's on the left. You can see them in action during this elevator test.
SpaceX will perform 1 uncrewed demonstration flight before NASA's Artemis 3 mission, which will be the first human surface expedition since 1972. After those first expeditions, we'll be ready to fly more people along with everything it takes to build a moon base. In many ways, Artemis feels like an extension of the human spaceflight work SpaceX and NASA have been partnering on for some time now. In fact, we just celebrated the anniversary of the Demo 2 mission.
That's right. Just 4 years ago, on May 30th, 2020, SpaceX launched the first crewed test flight of our Crew Dragon spacecraft. Dragon carried NASA astronauts Douglas Hurley and Robert Behnken to the International Space Station in the first crewed orbital spaceflight launched from the United States since the final Space Shuttle mission in 2011, and the first ever operated by a commercial provider. You can see Bob and Doug there on your screen. That was certainly a memorable day for all of us here at SpaceX, one that we fondly think back on. And it's exciting to think about Starship being the next to take its first astronauts to the moon. In tandem with Starship development, all of our operational human spaceflight missions are helping us prepare for those future trips to the moon. Our upcoming private astronaut mission, Polaris Dawn, you can see the crew there on your screen. They will play a big role in testing procedures that will be relevant to our moon and eventually Mars missions. We're looking forward to the third Polaris Dawn mission, which will be the first crewed Starship flight.
The Polaris Dawn crew will attempt to reach the highest apogee ever flown by a spacecraft, and they'll also be performing a spacewalk, or extravehicular activity, wearing SpaceX's newly designed spacesuits. They'll also be testing space-based communications, which will be critical to future deep space missions. The Polaris Dawn mission is currently targeted to launch no earlier than July of this year, so stay tuned, because that is going to be a very exciting mission to watch. In the meantime, at T-minus 12 minutes, let's check back in with Dan on today's countdown.
Hey, thanks, Jesse. Everything continues to go real smoothly. It's been a real quiet day so far. The board looks really clean, not tracking any impediments to a launch just under 12 minutes from now. Prop loads continuing. Looking at the numbers real quick, we're about 85% full on the ship. We did pause to start filling those header tanks on ship. Again, those are the two smaller tanks in the very top of the nose cone that we're going to use for that attempted landing burn with ship. And with the booster, we're just at about 75, 76% or so on our methane and LOX, so getting pretty full there. Those are going to continue down to about 3 minutes and 20 seconds before liftoff. That's when we'll close out all the prop on the ship. And then T-minus 2 minutes and 50 seconds on the booster. A lot of work also going on in the background. Our range safety teams working to make sure the area, not just around the pad, but in the sea space out in the Gulf and also in the anticipated entry point in the Indian Ocean are clear. We're not tracking any blockers, any boats, anything like that in the zone right now, but their work literally continues right up until those last couple of minutes. So they're working pretty hard to make sure everything stays clear. But right now the range is green. I already talked about it in the beginning. It looks a little bit cloudy, but weather not a concern today. Really light winds. We only had about a 5% chance of violation when we started this morning, and that's held. So everything continuing to look really good for launch so far. The pad itself is getting ready. Reminder that we're going to light those engines about 4 minutes before it actually takes off. So you'll see them start. The 33 engines on Super Heavy start to light prior to that T0, and then about 2 seconds after we'll start to see first motion. But everything looking great. Just coming up on 10 minutes until launch. Getting excited down here, ready to feel the rumble. I'll send it back to you guys over in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Dan. Teams are also getting excited here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. There is a pretty large crowd now gathering outside of Mission Control, located just behind Jesse and I. Now, actually, you can see it there on your screen.
There they are.
Everyone getting super pumped for our fourth flight test. Now, as a reminder on that note, today is just a test, the fourth of many future flight tests of Starship before it becomes fully operational. So whatever the outcome and however far we get, we can promise excitement. This rapid iterative development approach has been the basis for all of SpaceX's major innovative advancements, including Falcon, Dragon, and Starlink.
Today, we've successfully landed Falcon 9 boosters 316 times, changing humanity's understanding of what's possible when it comes to rocket reusability. And even though we are not recovering the booster or ship today, test flights like these provide critical data through every phase of flight. which will get us closer and closer to full reusability, and we have a lot more tests planned for this year. When we start recovering Starship boosters, we'll want them to return to the launch site for a quicker turnaround, which you can see in this animation on your screen. And that's when the tower reveals its dual purpose. After launch, the arms or chopsticks on the tower will help guide the booster into position to ensure a precision landing.
And our goal for the near future is to have 4 launch towers, 2 in Cape Canaveral in Florida, and they will look very similar to the ones that you see here in this animation. As we know, we find that our renderings tend to end up looking really similar to real life. So while this is a rendering, we do know we can look forward to this in the future. Like I said, we're going to have 2 at Cape Canaveral in Florida and 2 located at Starbase. Starbase will continue to be used for flight tests, and the towers at the Cape will come online as we prepare to fly operational Starship missions. In fact, we recently upgraded the actuators in the chopsticks, which are responsible for swinging those arms in for a catch. And we'll be testing an operational step on this flight by moving the chopsticks to the catch position immediately after Starship flies away.
That's going to be really incredible to see. As we mentioned, we have a lot more tests planned for this year, so we need a lot more hardware. Today we have ships and Super Heavy boosters built and either ready to launch or in testing for the next several flights, with more coming off of the production line as SpaceX's Star Factory continues to grow. The latest phase of the factory currently under construction will come online this summer, giving us several 100,000 more square feet of space.
Yeah, when you step into this factory, it is truly inspirational. My heart jumps out of my chest every time I'm there. Now, this will enable us to increase our production rate significantly as we build toward our long-term goal of producing 1 ship per day. And coming off the production line soon, Starship version 2. Now, with all that being said, let's check back in with Dan for the latest as we head into the terminal count.
Hey, thanks, Kate. Everything still looks great. We're getting ready to launch. We are just under 6.5 minutes away. You can see when we throw up the graphics for prop load that we're almost closed out. Ship more than 90% full. Those header tanks are done. And then the boosters coming up on 90% real soon. So we're going to see those close out in the next couple of minutes. Ship's going to end at about 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It'll be fully loaded. And then booster at about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. After all the props loaded on, we go through a lot of steps to safe ground systems. You're doing things called pushbacks, where you're just clearing all of those lines on the ground of propellant before we lift off. But once we're done, we're going to have 10 million pounds of liquid propellant on board Starship to help power the most powerful vehicle ever designed. If we do hold, we have a built-in hold gate at T-minus 40 seconds. We can hold there for about 30 minutes or so today. If we need to wait for final pressure checks or for if we have anything on the range, anything like that. Did just get that the range is green. So we are coming up 5 minutes and 20 seconds away. We are not planning to hold at T-minus 40 unless we trip some kind of hold alarm, something like that. So we could blow right through that gate and go right to launch. Don't be shocked if we hold at T40, though. And if we do, we can hold for a couple of minutes and then keep going. Our window is open all the way until 9 a.m. today.
Now, once we pass through T-minus 40 seconds, a number of events will occur in rapid succession. The ground spin and ignition systems will come up to flight pressure, and the ship will go to internal power.
Now, after that, the quick disconnect arm lockout is removed in preparation for retraction shortly after T0. Gas lines connected to the booster and ship are vented down, and once we pass T-minus 40 seconds, we still have the ability to recycle the count under certain conditions back to T-minus 40 seconds and hold there to assess what happened and if we can proceed again to T0.
However, once the water for the deflector system begins flowing at T-minus 10 seconds, any issue after that would be an automatic scrub for the day, as teams would need to refill the deflector's water tanks, as well as the lock storage tanks at the tank farm before making another attempt. So, as Dan mentioned earlier, we are not planning to hold at the optional T-minus 40 second mark. That that moment basically is what would allow teams to wait for final checkouts or assess prop levels or avionics, vehicle pressurization, the range, the weather. Weather is 95% go, as you can see from these incredible drone views that we have and pad cams. It is a beautiful day. Of course, we have some clouds billowing from the locks there.
Yeah, and again, a reminder that the payload for this mission is data, and our primary goal is to get ship through the extreme heat of reentry today. We're very excited to see that. We did get very close on Flight 3, so I'm excited to see how these iterations that we've made to the vehicle will help improve our chances of success today.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just as a reminder for the booster, now we are not attempting to recover any hardware today, both either on ship or booster. For the booster, we will be attempting to perform a landing burn to have a soft splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico. We made some improvements from our Flight 3 learnings, so hopefully that will work and we'll see a successful soft splashdown. For the ship, we're hoping to demonstrate controlled re-entry, including a flip maneuver and landing burn, and that will be followed by splashdown in the Indian Ocean. That is the same target as we had on Flight 3, so everything should look pretty similar in that regard. And we just heard the call out there that all prop load is closed out, so at this point, there is like 10 million pounds of propellant on board Starship, which is incredible.
This is getting very exciting. We are just about 2 minutes away from T0.
And as Jesse just said, we are under 2 minutes away. So prop load is complete. All the fill drain lines into ship and booster have closed. Right now we're doing the pushback, so clearing out all those ground lines of propellant. And that'll be completed over the next couple of seconds. We're coming up on that T-minus 40 mark. Again, not planning to hold. If we do, or if we get a hold after we pass it, we can snap back to that T-minus 40, and then we can stay there for about 30 minutes or so if any other issues crop up. Once we pass T-minus 40, a lot of things happen, both on the vehicle and the ground. It's running a lot of its own self-checkouts, venting different tanks and pressure lines throughout the vehicle. We essentially built that 40 seconds as that's about how much time it takes for the vehicle to take all of those actions, which is why we hold there. But all of that happens automated. You do a final checkout of the TVC, the thrust vector control, how we're going to steer. And then we see liftoff. So we're under a minute away. "45 seconds and counting.
Good event, gate met.
All right, now as we close in, we are past the 40-second mark. So let's listen in. Flight Director Ty Huntington's going to take us through one more time for a Starship liftoff.
T-minus 15. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. We have liftoff.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
All right, 30 seconds into flight. The rumbles are still building here in the Raptor's nest. We're seeing 32 out of 33 engines lit on the Super Heavy right now. Coming up shortly is going to be max Q, that maximum aerodynamic pressure as we go uphill on the vehicle.
Max Q.
All right, we just passed through max Q, so we're going to continue on up. We still have about a minute and 30 seconds until we get to stage separation. Starship now flying faster than the speed of sound. All right, so you got a couple of views. You got some ground trackers in your top camera there. You're looking down from the top of the booster in the bottom left, and then a camera in the top flap of the ship looking back in the bottom right, so getting a couple of different looks as Starship heads uphill. Once we get the hot staging, a lot of things happen all at once simultaneously. We're going to light the engines on the ship, starting with the RVACs first, and then the 3 center sea level engines before we're separated. All of that exhaust gets plumed out the side of the hot stage, and then the ship will separate itself. All but the 3 center engines on the booster are going to shut down, so the booster never stops its thrust while we go through this hot stage maneuver. After that, the booster is going to do its flip, start heading back, and then the ship will be on its own power on its way to space. So that should be coming up in just about 30 seconds from now. As of right now, still looking in like 32 out of 33 Raptors lit on the booster. And we'll start to see those stagger down. They're going to turn off in banks, so you'll see the lights on the bottom left screen of the engines that are active start to turn off in different groups, and you'll see those 3 center ones lit.
Booster engine cut off. Ship ignition. Stage separation confirmed.
Boost back burn start up.
Acquisition signal. Houston.
Hot stage confirmed. Ship under its own power. Booster boosting back. Looks like all 13 are lit. Kate, we got a booster on the way back to the Gulf and a ship on the way to space.
Acquisition signal. Status.
Ship chamber pressures are nominal.
Ship power and telemetry nominal.
All right, the first stage currently performing the boost back burn. This is expected to last a little over 1 minute. This propels the booster back toward the coast, taking it to a landing in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. As you can see on your screen in the bottom left-hand corner, we were only using the 13 center engines from here on.
Boost back burn shut down.
Heard confirmation there of good boost back burn shutdown.
H2 tank pressures are nominal.
Lots of excitement. So right here, this is our view of the jettisoned hot stage. As we mentioned, this is a temporary fix to help reduce the weight of the booster, the Super Heavy booster. Future iterations will have a lighter weight integrated hot stage structure that won't need to be jettisoned. Now, after we jettison that hot stage, the booster will begin to attempt its water landing in the Gulf. In the meantime, the ship will coast for about 40 minutes or so up to an altitude of 214 kilometers. And after its coast phase, it will attempt a controlled reentry, including a flip maneuver and a landing burn, just before splashing down in the Indian Ocean. But as a reminder, we are not attempting...
Trajectory nominal.
Good news there. Trajectory is looking good for the ship, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. At this point in time, as you can see, we have no engines lit on the booster. It is coasting back toward the Gulf of Mexico for a water landing and ship under power of all 6 Raptor engines. There's 3 sea level and 3 vacuum Raptor engines that are lit, as we can see on your screen.
These views have been looking incredible. Super Heavy has been performing beautifully today. And you can hear the crowd is very excited about it. As a reminder for Booster, the primary goal today is to do a landing burn and a splashdown in the water. And we are just about 30 seconds away from that landing burn expecting to begin. And an incredible view from the forward portion of the booster. This is basically on top of the Super Heavy booster where we have jettisoned that hot stage. So now we can see this incredible view of Earth as it's making its way back down to the Gulf of Mexico. Right now, the booster is using the 4 hypersonic grid fins to guide itself through atmospheric re-entry. And we are expecting that landing burn here. And we will be igniting 13 engines, and this is a great view. On your left-hand side is 3 views from the booster, and your right-hand side a view from the ship. And you can see those grid fins on your left-hand screen rotating and turning to guide the booster, and there's that landing burn. That landing burn just begun, and you can see the water below. And we have splashdown. What an incredible sight! Congratulations to the SpaceX team!
Ship has entered terminal guidance.
That was absolutely incredible. The first successful splashdown of the Super Heavy booster. Loved seeing it just tip over into the water before losing that footage. Now the next milestone is coming up in about under a minute. The ship is going to shut off its Raptor engines,
Ship engine cut off.
Which we see right there. As we mentioned before, today's test flight is not an orbital flight, but rather one that demonstrates the Starship's orbital capability. So right now, we are under power with just the 3 center Raptor engines. Expecting those, and just there we could see that those have also successfully cut off.
Ship FDS is saved.
What an incredible...
Nominal orbit insertion.
Oh, there's great news there. The call out we were hoping to hear. Amazing views once again from Starship. We have our second Starship in space. These live views being brought to us by Starlink, which is on board the ship. Dan, what an incredible view we have once again. So exciting. We got another ship in space.
I'm like still jumping up and down. This whole building was going absolutely insane when we saw the booster hit the water. I mean, wow. Congrats to everybody that's just been putting in insane amounts of hours on everything to make this thing a reality. And I feel like every single time we do one of these, we're seeing something wildly new. We got to see the hot stage jettison and the booster in the water. But just to recap real quick over everything that's happened. So we lifted off at 7:50 a.m. only 9 minutes ago. How has it only been 9 minutes? 7:50 a.m. Central at 12:50 UTC. We saw 32 of the 33 Raptor engines on Super Heavy make the ascent. We had successful cutoff, successful hot staging. All 6 engines on the ship powered it all the way into a nominal orbital trajectory. And we've already been getting some live views from the ship on board. After that, the booster was able to do its boost back burn. Oh, this looks like we're actually getting some views from the ground still, potentially from Florida, of the ship as it's up there. That's a view from some of our tracking cameras on the ground in Florida. But the ship, we just heard successful orbital insertion, so it's right where it needs to be and is now going to continue on its way to coast until it comes to reentry. But I mean, the booster, successful boost back burn, jettison the hot stage, and then a landing burn. It looked like we saw 12 of the 13 engines light up, and then that first ever soft splashdown in the water. So a whole lot still to come. Ship now on its way to its primary objective of entry. That's going to be coming up in just under 40 minutes from now. So a lot still to come, but wow, what a 9 minutes to start this mission off. So can't wait to see what entry is going to show us, but that launch was incredible. Back over to you, Jesse and Kate.
Wow. I am still trying to catch my breath here. That was some incredible views that we have never seen before. It has been nonstop since liftoff, and with the booster having completed its job for the day, we're going to take a short break for about the next 28 minutes, and we'll return while we're going to take a break while the ship is continuing to coast before re-entry.
Exactly. As with Flight 3, Starlink may enable us to talk with the ship through re-entry with no communication blackout. We are still testing Starlink during this phase of flight, so of course nothing is certain. However, if we do have views, we will be sure to bring those to you live. Views such as the one, that we had. Well, of course, because I said it went away. So we will try to bring those to you live.
Exactly. Views or no views, we'll see you back here at T plus 40 minutes for coverage of Starship's re-entry, flip maneuver, landing burn, and splashdown.
Expected loss signal, Key West. Expected loss signal, Cape Canaveral. Acquisition signal, Puerto Rico.
RVAC pre-valves are open.
Expect a lost signal, Puerto Rico. Acquisition signal, hard to be stock.
Starship is slowing to entry attitude.
Welcome back to Starship's fourth flight test. It has been an exciting day so far. We had an on-time liftoff of 7:50 a.m. Central Time, followed by successful hot staging, stage separation, jettisoning of the hot stage structure, an epic super heavy booster landing, water landing in the Gulf of Mexico, the first successful return of the super heavy booster. So that was incredible to see. And right now, the ship is in space. As you can see here by this view, we're looking at one of the flaps of Starship, one of four. You can actually see a close-up side detail of some of those hexagonal heat shield tiles. Now, coming up around T plus 49 minutes, the ship will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. As a reminder, the primary goal of today's flight test is for a ship to make it through the extreme heat of re-entry. This is typically a portion of flight where we don't have communications with the spacecraft because it's re-entering at or around orbital velocity, which is about 8 kilometers per second or roughly 5 miles per second. At those speeds, the spacecraft moving through the atmosphere results in friction and creates a plasma field around the vehicle. That blanket of plasma distorts, as you can see, that plasma blanket, which you can kind of see here, distorts communication frequencies. So we're left with a brief blackout in communication.
Yeah, that's right, Kate. And Starlink's what's really allowing us to capture as much data as possible, especially through this reentry. Updated animation, landing burn. I hope we get to see it for real today. But these live views that we're getting now and we're going to continue to get are through Starlink. That's going to allow us to get as much data as possible, which we've said it before. We're going to say it 9,000 times. The data is the payload on these flights. So as much as we can learn, that's just going to pay dividends on all of our future flights and help us get Starship to an operational phase. Reentry, obviously a really critical phase of the flight, and it's the one that we're now most focused on cracking to get us closer to that full reusability. Starlink is going to be able to send us data back all the way through reentry. We've done some additional testing, and we're expecting to be able to get data from Starlink thanks to its high frequency and kind of the orientation and everything of Starship all the way through reentry. And then got a new view here. We have two external views. We had this one on Flight 3. We've got two for this one. And we're going to continue adding views as we continue to evolve Starship. Again, this is an experimental vehicle. Believe me, I want as many camera views as you all do. So huge shout out to the AVI and the software teams and everybody that's been working with us. We're getting more cameras on Starship, not just because it looks cool, but this provides an incredible insight into reentry, which is, historically a really tough window to look through.
Approaching entry interface.
The physics of reentry are insanely intense. One of my favorite NASA astronauts, Victor Glover, recently described it as with the forces and the flows and the temperatures, it's like pointing at a raging river in one spot and saying, tell me exactly what's happening right there. And that's what a ship is experiencing as it goes through, as it's moving through the atmosphere at, more than 5 miles a second and heating up to thousands of degrees. So just having visual representation, just being able to see what's happening is incredibly valuable. So these views are going to be through Starlink. We've got this one. This is in one of the forward flaps looking back. So if you see it rotating around, that's because, again, it's embedded in one of those forward flaps. So as we get through and we start to build up density in the atmosphere, this view is going to move around as the flap does. And then the other one we had a little bit earlier is looking at one of the other forward flaps on the other side. Eventually, we're going to keep adding more cameras to Starship, get a couple of different views from the outside of all the different areas, and then also eventually to be able to see payloads once they're deployed. So a lot more exciting stuff coming up in the future. But right now, we're getting closer to reentry. Again, we're going to be moving at hypersonic speeds at more than 5 times the speed of sound. We're going to see that plasma start to build. So, Kate, Jesse, excitement coming up.
Yeah, as you can see with that view on your screen, again, high def brought to us by Starlink. We can see the plasma beginning to build as the ship is getting closer to the Earth's atmosphere. Now, let's talk a little bit about how Starship will survive reentry, hopefully, and control itself.
Exactly. We've been talking about this entire flight test. There's 18,000 hexagonal ceramic tiles surrounding the bottom portion or the Earth-facing side of the ship.
Through 100 kilometers altitude, good altitude for entry.
Great call-outs there. Now, during atmospheric reentry, the vehicle is going to see temperatures as high as 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit or over 1,400 degrees Celsius. So those tiles are there to help protect the vehicle from this extreme heat.
Yeah, and the flaps will help control it. Now, one noticeable difference I see immediately, those flaps are not moving as much as they were on Flight 3. So that is a great sign, right? We had unplanned loss of roll control on Flight 3, so we added some additional thrusters, and we can see that they're working well, and we have a much more stable view. So those flaps, there's 4 of them, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. They're made out of stainless steel. And they help steer the ship, which, as we can see, the plasma continuing to build. Now, if the ship survives reentry, it will have to perform a flip maneuver as well as a landing burn. We saw this demonstrated in a couple of high-altitude flight tests back in 2020, 2021. Similarly,
temperatures increasing on the nose within expected ranges.
Great news there. It sounds like the temperatures that we are getting during this point, which again, we usually don't get during spaceflight because of this plasma. We're getting this live. This is a great news. So similarly to, for example, the serial number 10 test that we saw a couple years ago, we're hoping to duplicate that again today. Hopefully we will see it live. And basically the 3 center engines of the ship will reignite and gimbal or point to help flip the ship until those engines are pointing down so that it can land vertically using Raptor's thrust.
And as you can see, even from the beginning of the program, we've designed Starship to land on Mars where there are no runways or other humans to help out. We also want rapid reusability, so we're doing...
The vehicle is passing through 85 kilometers altitude. The flaps have control of the vehicle.
Great news. Flaps have control of the vehicle. That's exactly what we want to hear for this flight test.
Yeah.
Again, we are going to be doing a propulsive landing instead of a more traditional means like parachutes. And we are expecting re-entry to begin here in just about a minute. Re-entry, an awesome view that we have here.
Starship remains on a good entry trajectory.
This is the same view that we had when we first returned from the coast phase. Again, this is looking at the side of one of the flaps. It's incredible that literally at the bottom of this picture, we're basically looking through plasma, which is just absolutely mind-blowing.
Wild, very wild. Now we are expecting entry to begin here in about 30 seconds or so. Entry to splashdown is expected to last about 6 minutes long. And that flip maneuver should occur around about 10 minutes before splashdown. And such incredible views that we're getting.
Approaching peak heating region.
Great call outs there.
Yeah, these views are absolutely astounding.
Nose temperatures continue to rise within expected region.
And in your bottom right-hand corner, you can also follow along with the altitude of ship as it's returning back to Earth.
So once again, this view is basically looking down into the plasma blanket that is building up around the exterior of Starship. It is traveling, as you can see on your screen. You can look in the bottom right-hand corner and see how fast it's going, how high it is, as well as the general orientation. Again, we're seeing a lot more stability, a lot more control here on this flight, which is great. It shows that the iterations, the learning...
Starship is now in expected peak heating region.
All right, great news there, telling us that this is basically the hottest point that Starship should get during its re-entry. Now, the heat shield is working with the atmosphere for some free braking, okay? The atmosphere is helping to slow the Starship down.
Yeah, exactly. We're not using any engines or thrust to slow the vehicle down. Exactly what Kate mentioned. We're just using the atmosphere and those heat shield tiles protecting the vehicle as it's coming through that high heat temperature.
Yeah. Now, this is another one of those moments that we have been waiting for. Right now, the ship is currently re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, and by all looks and all call-outs that we're hearing on the net, it is doing pretty well. Now, we do not plan to recover the spacecraft today, but rapid and reliable reusability is the ultimate goal.
And just pausing to just take in this incredible new and different view that we're seeing. We did get a similar view in Flight 3, but again, the vehicle did lose a little bit of its control, attitude control, and this is a very stable view. This is great. This is exactly what we want, and we are hearing that we're getting expected call-outs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Starship is seeing half a G of acceleration, remains on a good entry trajectory.
You know, it's incredible to look at this photo and wonder, wait, is it real? Is it frozen? We can see so I was just going to say
Those temperatures have stopped increasing.
Oh, that is great news. The temperature is no longer building. But I was saying, we have a little bit of indication there. We can see that streaking that occurs and tells us that this is indeed a true view. So once again, we are looking basically through the plasma that is building up around the exterior of the ship.
And I still cannot get over that we are getting a live view of re-entry right now, live on your screen. Again, we've said this over and over, but all thanks to Starlink. We are able to use Starlink in space, which we're getting this incredible data. And not only just the data from the sensors, but getting live imagery of what is actually happening, which is great, which we've never been able to do live before.
Right. Now, just a quick future outlook here. So in about, let's see, at T plus about 1 hour and 2 minutes, we should hear a call out for entry transonic. That means that the ship is going near the speed of sound. And then about a minute after that, we'll hear another call out saying entry subsonic, meaning that the ship is going below the speed of sound. So these are all continued indications that the atmosphere, right, as the ship comes back down, it is getting through the more dense part of the atmosphere, and that atmosphere is helping to push against the vehicle, and those heat shields are protecting the vehicle during this high heat period.
Yeah, Kate and Jesse, we're starting to see as the atmosphere gets denser, you're starting to see a few more particles make an appearance in the plasma there. You can see you're looking down at the aft end of the ship in the top left, and you're seeing essentially the flame build up as we go through reentry. You've been hearing the call-outs. They're tracking things like temperatures in the nose cone, and those were right where we modeled them to be, which is really cool to see and to see in real time. But we're coming up, we're at about 67 kilometers in altitude. Our last signal with the ship on Flight 3 was at 65, so we should be making it past that point shortly. Obviously, as you guys pointed out, we're in a much better control this time as we re-entered in the right attitude, and our flaps have been steering the way so far. Once we get through transonic, that's when you've got essentially
Raptor landing bird.
Different areas around the vehicle where the air is either moving faster or slower than the speed of sound. We'll eventually get to subsonic, which we have some experience with. We did in our suborbital campaign.
Start of Raptor chill.
And Starship will eventually get down to its terminal velocity as it's floating down to the water. That's just about 200 miles an hour or so. We are hearing that we're starting to chill some of the engines as we are, if we make it all the way down to the water, still going to attempt a landing burn, but still a ways to go. We're at about 64 kilometers in altitude right now. We made it through what's expected to be the peak heating, but now we're going to start encountering increased pressures as the atmosphere gets thicker and thicker. So we're at 63 kilometers, so we've already made it farther than we did on our last flight when that last signal was coming at 65 kilometers. So again, what we're really looking at here is the performance of the heat shield, of the flaps, of the seals in the flaps. There's just a whole bunch of different areas that we're keeping a really close eye on as we re-enter.
Starship remains on a good entry trajectory.
And looking like we're still on a good trajectory. If you're seeing little camera moves, that's the flap moving as it continues to maintain the attitude of the vehicle as it re-enters. And I mean, not just camera views, but we've got sensors inside the ship. We've got those sensors down at the very aft end of the vehicle where we pointed out we had some intentionally missing tiles, where we've got some sensors looking at just how hot it's getting around there. We intentionally put those in essentially the least critical part of the heat shield, where if you had any kind of a breach, it wouldn't be great for reusability, but wouldn't be critical for actual making it through the reentry into the landing. "58 kilometers, we're continuing to descend. Again, right now we are over the Indian Ocean. We're actually getting closer and closer to that expected splashdown point, which is just to the off the northwest corner of Australia. And if you keep an eye on our speed, the speed is dropping. We're hitting the thicker part of the atmosphere now. The speed's going to start dropping precipitously. We're going to start getting to transonic pretty soon, and then after that we'll get into subsonic, where we're moving less than the speed of sound. But wow, what a light show so far.
External temperatures are starting to come down.
Again, this camera view is looking right at one of the forward flaps. And we're strategically putting some cameras around the vehicle to just look at the different areas. Looks like we got the flap starting to come apart a little.
Yeah, it does appear that we have a little bit of burn through there. We can see pieces of the vehicle flying off. What a show it has been. It's been like watching Interstellar or something.
This is wild to see this, but the ship is still coming down, which is incredible to see.
How far can it go? That is the question.
Keep your eye on the altitude in the bottom right-hand corner. We're at 54 kilometers right now.
Now, ultimately, the data is the payload today. We've been saying it multiple times. Our teams are sitting, reviewing this data live, learning where the hot spots are. As you can see, there's an obvious hot spot there with the flap, and learning how we can improve this design. The goal was to get as far through this high heat re-entry as possible. Ideally, we'd love to make it all the way down and perform that landing burn and flip maneuver, but we may not get that far today. We will see.
Again, this is a test, and we are gathering as much data as possible, visual data as well, which we can see here. We are getting a lot of debris covering the camera on your screen, but we can still see some of those sparks and flames from that high heat as ship is making its way back down to Earth.
Ship now at 50 kilometers and closing. The good news is we still got, looks like that camera lens just cracked. It's safe to say ship's getting a little beat up, but that's to be expected on a test flight. We are still learning how to improve the ship for total survival and recovery of the high heat reentry.
I'm honestly impressed that we're still getting this live view despite how much debris is coming off of this flap right now.
The fact that we've got it is good news. And I may have jinxed it. I apologize. Look at that. It's back.
We are still going.
And the teams here at SpaceX are excited, as you can tell by the cheering behind us. There's still a sizable crowd here at Mission Control Center, Hawthorne.
A splashdown is expected in just about 4 minutes from now. And we're still moving. We still have live views. Starlink is doing an incredible job.
Maximum entry dynamic pressure. External temperatures are dropping.
Okay, good news. Those external pressures are dropping. The question is, how much of the ship is left? We can't really tell. We can still see some of that particulate coming off. And unfortunately, we do have a cracked camera lens. But for any photographers out there and videographers, we know that's part of the gig sometimes.
Yeah, and you can see that the speed is rapidly slowing down. That's actually really great news for us. We want the vehicle to be slowing down before it splashes down into the ocean. That'll help set us up for that flip maneuver, engines first down into the water.
Exactly. So we have seen this flip maneuver demonstrated on previous high altitude flight tests like serial number 8. Oh, more views. Or I should say, more light coming through the view that we have through that cracked and dirtied lens there. But yeah, so we're hoping that this flip maneuver, that we can pull it off as soon as we get those views back. If we can get them, if the ship is still around, we will bring it back to you.
Vehicle has passed maximum dynamic pressure.
That is great news. Maximum dynamic pressure being the moment in which the vehicle experiences the greatest amount of aerodynamic pressure. Speed still dropping. We're now at 37 kilometers above the ocean. Just like Flight 3, we are targeting a splashdown in the water in the Indian Ocean.
And we don't have a live view right now, but because we're still getting data and telemetry, that does tell us that ship is still doing okay, at least. And there we got that live view back. The crowd very excited to see that view, despite not being able to see very much.
The fact that it's there tells us the ship is still alive.
Yes, and collecting data, continuing to collect data as we get closer and closer to Earth.
Yes, now 30 kilometers, now 29 above the Indian
Starship is
Ocean.
at 30 kilometers altitude, Mach 2.
Sounds like the vehicle's traveling, as we just heard, Mach 2, which is, looks like we might, I thought maybe it might clear up. It is a little bit, now at T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes and 13 seconds into Starship Flight 4, hoping that the ship can hang on. It's probably potentially hanging on by a couple of bolts and threads, but it's still going, and that is excellent news.
That deceleration is looking incredible. We're about to go under 1,000 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
Starship is at 20 kilometers altitude.
Now, keep in mind that even though we can't see anything, the data itself is what we really are.
Starship is subsonic.
Subsonic, they're telling us it's traveling below the speed of sound. That movement means the flaps are actuating. I think we can see something. This is a nail biter. But we are, unfortunately, we can't see through the lens, but we're still getting the feed. Starship is now 11 kilometers over the ocean. All this data is incredibly important, even if, it breaks up right now. Okay, we can see that flap actuating through the glass.
Starship is passing through 10 kilometers altitude.
Okay, the next milestone will be initiation of the flip maneuver and landing burn. Keep an eye on the bottom right corner of your screen for those 3 center engines to relight. They will gimbal or angle so that the ship flips itself back up vertical and hopefully lands in a vertical position.
And the crowd is very excited to get this view of that flap still maneuvering.
Starship is passing through 5 kilometers altitude.
This is incredible. We're getting very close to splashdown.
These fireflies are such a good sign of life right now. We wish we could see more, but we'll take it.
Starship is at 2 kilometers altitude, terminal velocity.
Landing burn startup for Starship.
All right, good news there.
Nominal chamber pressure.
Landing board startup.
Starship is in landing burn.
Landing burn shutdown.
The landing burn shutdown was commanded. Wow. I mean, it was a little bit of use your imagination as you were going down with what we could actually see, but we were able to hear the ship did its landing burn. It sounded
Starship
like we might have got
shutdown.
2 engines. And there's the final call for landing burn shutdown, but we'll go back through all the data, but we did get confirmation that a landing burn took place. Starship made it through re-entry and did its first ever landing burn. from South Texas to the other side of the earth. Starship is in the water. What a day. What a day, guys. Yeah. That was absolutely incredible. We we got views pretty much the whole way down. Analysis said it could do it. We weren't sure if it was going to be able to happen, but Starlink powered through, and we were able to get signal. We started to get some debris on the cameras and everything, but we were able to see it. So, I mean, what a day. Just recapping, everything started off today. We lifted off from here in Starbase just about an hour ago. It feels like a lifetime. Successful super heavy ascent, boost back, and its own splashdown in the Gulf. Ship made it to space, kept its attitude. Successful re-entry through peak heating. We got to see it under flap control through the atmosphere, and we got call out of our first ever ship landing burn after launch into space. So just really incredible. So I'm going to take some time to collect myself, but wow, that was incredible. I can't wait for the next one. Over to you guys.
It was so loud here. I haven't heard the crowd get that loud probably since liftoff of Flight 1, honestly.
That was incredible. Congratulations to our teammates, to everyone who supported the Starship program. Thanks to all of our future customers for your support. And we'd also like to thank the people of Cameron County, Texas, as well as the Coast Guard, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the government of Mexico. And since Starship got a little bit toasty from that extreme